Thank you all for your patience and your incredible hospitality. It's just a real delight to come and visit you all. And my only regret is my pants is tighter after that meal of grits and cheese and bacon and oysters last night, but it was fantastic. And, really appreciate all of your generosity. I echo what the other speakers have said as well. So I'll take you through this, and what I'd like you to be able to do is understand this title by the end of this. And I'm going to come back to that, but I was given the question of where in the world are you located? So we're located in this institute here, and that building is actually where the laboratory is. And to golfers amongst you, this is Torrey Pines Golf Course. So we are across the street from Torrey Pines. So now you have two reasons to come and visit me. And actually the ocean too. So that's that blue thing over there. So do come out and visit, and it'd be a pleasure. So let's take a look at this title. Endogenous. Endogenous means that it's within us. It's not coming from outside. It's actually part of us. Viral-like, that refers to things that look like viruses, but they're not. They're part of us. And then genes, you know about chunks of DNA that encode proteins that make us us. And then the propagation of Alzheimer's disease pathology. And I just started talking about that when the slide snafu occurred, but we can see this very clearly here, that Alzheimer's disease doesn't just pop up, it actually progresses with age and time. And what you can see is a cross section to the brain, and the white is fairly normal brain, and then you can see the gray and then the darker stuff that's accumulating over time. And as you can see, it doesn't pop up everywhere. It actually seems to move through different parts of the brain. It progresses. So that's a notion of progression. So why in the world would disease pathology do that? And it turns out that your brain is actually hooked up with freeways, with highways, with toll roads, with little back roads. And that's what you're kind of seeing here in some diagrams from the Allen Brain Institute. And all of these different freeways and byways indicate how the brain is connected to itself. And this is just a small snapshot of that. So what it suggests is that you can actually have progression that's mediated by these different freeways, byways, roadways. And why would that occur? It's because your brain is composed of neurons. And the neurons consist of a cell body, as well as these long processes called axons. And then the business end of the neuron are these things called synapses, these teeny little dots here. And they're blown up in higher magnification here. So neurons from distant connections in our brain, they communicate through synapse. And within the synapses, there are spheres that contain chemicals, and these are called synaptic vesicles. And you can see them enlarged here, and they're pretty clear. And what happens normally is that this vesicle will fuse with this portion of the so-called terminal, and it releases its contents, the neurotransmitters that allow your neurons to talk to one another. Okay, so if we take another look at these vesicles, they're clear, but in fact, vesicles can be not clear. And they can have so-called dense cores like this one here. So these are higher electron micrographs, higher magnification pictures of what's actually within that synapse. And we have these clear vesicles that you saw previously, but we also have these dense cores, and you can actually isolate them as shown here and using various biophysical kinds of techniques. And these vesicles have been known for many, many years, certainly over half a century. But it occurred to us and to others that they sort of look like a virus. And in fact, their size, for those of you with good eyes can see, this is 0.25 microns or 250 nanometers. And so this is maybe about 100 nanometers in diameter. And that's about the size of a virus. And when we talk about viruses, I want to call your attention especially to the RNA viruses. And so you can have within a virus two types of genomes, one that's RNA and one that's DNA. So we're going to talk about the RNA viruses, and you know only too well about these RNA viruses. And so this is a picture COVID-19, CoV-2 as it's called. It is a single-stranded RNA virus. It has various components we won't go into, but it has relationships to other RNA viruses, and there's a whole slew of them. It's like a potpourri of different viruses. And there's one that you also know extremely well, which are the HIV retroviruses, as they're called. So this is a picture of the retroviral life cycle. And viruses are really experts at getting into cells. They're designed by nature to actually go in there and infect. Moreover, retroviruses have a curious property that part of their life cycle is that their genome actually gets copied into DNA and it goes into the genome itself. And then it pops out again as an RNA and that repeats itself. So how's that relevant to the endogenous aspects of these viral-like properties? And it turns out that our bodies, our genomes, are composed about 50% of ancient retroviruses that infected us and our species over the millennia. So if you look at the distribution, these names are just in reference to various types of retroviral sequences. Their names aren't important, but you can see the actual numbers of genes, the percentage is very low. So most of what's in our genomes is in fact derived, at least in this half of the pie, from these retroviral or viral types of sequences. In addition, there's still unknown stuff in here, and it's quite likely that there are other aspects of the genome that also arose from similar types of processes. If we look further at how this relates to the endogenous virus particles or virus components, retroviruses and the endogenous viral-like vesicles may share elements from the genome that underlie Alzheimer's disease. And we will find this out with the help of you all and CART. And so we'll be looking at these vesicles, not from the viruses themselves, but from what's actually within the human brain. And then we're going to drill down and look at the contents of those vesicles and determine what's in them, especially as they relate to Alzheimer's disease pathology. And so what CART will enable us to do is to study these Alzheimer's disease viral-like vesicles, find out what they contain, and then find out whether they can transmit AD pathology. And you heard from Dr. Kim, there are ways that one can study this within 3D cultures. And the notion is that somehow these vesicles are being transmitted in Alzheimer's disease to produce damage. So perhaps they kill cells, or they may get infected, in quotes, by endogenous particles that alter their function, which might be part of the reason one has some of the symptomatology that one sees and pathology that one sees with Alzheimer's disease. If this is true, then this could point to new, in quotes, antiviral types of therapeutics that target these different components within the Alzheimer's disease brain. And things that come to mind are, say, antiretroviral medicines that include reverse transcriptase inhibitors. And from some distinct work, we found that there may indeed be mechanisms that employ these types of endogenous reverse transcriptases that promote aspects of Alzheimer's disease. And in various types of post hoc analyses looking at patients who have actually been on antiretroviral therapies, such as the HIV population or hepatitis B population, there is a signal of reduced Alzheimer's disease incidence and prevalence in those populations. Now, all of this would require prospective clinical trials, and we're hopeful that that type of thing can be pursued. But in the meantime, there's a lot left to look at, including all the different components of these viral-like particles that are endogenous to us. So this is what CART will allow us to pursue. So you now know that we're talking about endogenous viral-like genes and proteins in the propagation of Alzheimer's disease pathology. And thanks to you, we're going to be able to address this question. And indeed, thank you to all of you Rotarians and to CART. And I'm happy to take questions.
Since you're studying within, there are other brain autism, other things that could you possibly find the this would help out with that also? With
Yeah,
all-
it's a brilliant question. And indeed, we believe this is a more universal phenomenon that could impact a lot of different aspects of brain and brain disease.
Okay.
So, I mean, I really agree that's fascinating hypothesis and I agree with your work. Just wondering whether you remember, you know that there are other studies on the viruses, not like viralized particular HIV and herpes and several other viruses has been proposed associated with Alzheimer's. So what do you think about that side? Do you think it's like viral infections, brain viral infection can accelerate this process, or is there any interactions? I want to hear your thoughts.
Sure, sure. And I think nature is telling us that there probably is an intersection that could promote pathology. And if you actually look at the epidemiology of these diseases, there are links to things, even getting whacked in the head or football players with CTE, or how does that relate to some of the mechanisms? Well, maybe you stimulate some of these types of endogenous viral things in the same way you get infected with a virus, including, I would say, SARS-CoV-2. And there's some debate about whether that goes in the genome. It probably does, but that's just nature doing it. And I think that's sort of an important aspect of all this, is when you look at our genomes, we are the product of those viral infections that have made us as a species. So yes, it's nasty. It wipes out a certain percentage of our population. And yet from this pandemic, probably something off in the distant future might actually benefit from this, whatever's next in thinking about evolution or changes to our species and other species for that matter. So when you look at it from that perspective, this is just part of the natural course of evolution.